Thank you so much. So, welcome everyone. Welcome to the pre-conference event of the 5th World Congress on Disaster Management. Today, National Institute of Disaster Management and Special Center for Disaster Research, Jawaharlal Nehru University, has collaborated to bring forward a very important issue of disaster research. So I welcome you all again for the special roundtable workshop on perspectives in disaster research, status, needs, and opportunities. I welcome our guest of honor today, Shri Krishna S. Vatsa, member NDMA. I welcome all our eminent panelists, Professor Delanthi Amratunga, Dr. Akhilesh Gupta, Dr. Neeraj Sinha, Dr. Preeti Bansal, and our eminent dignitaries, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, Dr. P.G. Jai Chakravarti, Professor Anil Kumar Gupta sir, and Dr. Abhijit Dwivedi. Disaster research is one of the most important domains to tackle disaster-related issues. A large amount of studies have been produced on disaster-related issues over last decades of research, but still there are gaps in translating knowledge into action. Asian continent in particular is known for the mosaic of disaster incidences, sources of vulnerability and social and economic challenges, which is different from remaining world. So this webinar would discuss the status and needs of disaster research and expectations of both the research institutions and the policy makers towards this. So without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Anil Kumar Gupta sir to set the context of this webinar. So Professor Anil Kumar Gupta sir is the head of the department of the ECDRM division, NIDM. Anil Gupta sir, all over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Kopal. I am very pleased to witness this very important deliberation today. This theme of this particular roundtable workshop, which is one of the pre-conference event of the 5th World Congress on Disaster Management, is on looking into the perspectives of disaster research. Why disaster research is now being considered as very important aspect is because of certain specific reasons. One is that the disaster management is a growing discipline. It has emerged from a number of disciplines at the same time. For example, the community-based interventions stemmed from the social science disciplines, climate change adaptation, retrofitting, these kind of things evolved from engineering and scientific domains, earth sciences, environmental sciences. However, now there is a great discussion on inclusiveness in disaster management. Looking to this, now there are discussions towards transdisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity of the discipline of disaster management. Disaster management as emerging sometimes as a sub-discipline of social sciences, or sub-discipline of engineering sciences, or sub-discipline of environmental sciences, or other disciplines, also have a lot of overlaps and co-benefits with policies, practice, and field interventions. And that is the reason it also requires a regular updating and advancing the knowledge in the discipline of disaster management. And for this, contribution of new knowledge is important. Besides this, there are also knowledge gap that exists. We also have to see where are the actual knowledge gaps and how do we address it. The disaster research would also relate to the issues of interpretation and inferences of the available data, and sometimes how to address the data gaps also. The research may also relate to the decision support systems, that how the existing information or the information gap is addressed to arrive at some kind of fruitful conclusions. We have also been working closely with the scientific institutions in the country, Department of Science and Technology, CSIR, a number of academic institutions and under various projects. But one of the common theme has been of science policy research practice interface for disaster risk management. Today morning also, we had a detailed discussion under a specific program that is relating with development of disaster management plan. And we were discussing that how the recent policy of Government of India on science, technology and innovation, where DST has taken up that policy, and Dr. Akhilesh Gupta, who is present here, he has been the key person for taking up that policy. Now we are also working to look at that how a science and research policy for disaster risk reduction can also be taken up. So we are also looking at the past experiences, present context, and also the futuristic issues, and also the domains where we call it what if analysis, or also the forensic analysis of the past disasters. So there are diverse issues and diverse opportunities that exist within disaster management. But what are the expectations of the field level professionals? What are the expectations from the policy level professionals? And how do the science streams look at it? I think this is a very important aspect to discuss. And today's this roundtable conference, basically we are going to share each other's ideas. We are also going to witness that how disaster research has to start looking itself and other domains for integration also and to advance itself. So with this, I would be looking forward to listen to the resource persons and experts of the day who have been working at various forums, at various levels in the domains of science, technology, interdisciplinary sciences, interdisciplinary studies and disaster management, and also disaster management practice. Dr. Krishna Vatsa, member NDMA, who is the chief guest of the day, is in a meeting, and at the moment the meeting is over, he will be joining and will also address him. So thanks to the Executive Director NIDM, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, and Dr. PG Dhar Chakravarti, who is the chair of the Science and Technology Committee of World Congress on Disaster Management, for suggesting this very important initiative. And thanks to all the expert panelists for making it possible to join and agree to address this at this occasion. Over to you, Dr. Kopal, for taking the agenda forward.
Thank you very much, sir, for setting the context of the this workshop, this very important workshop, and once again welcoming all the eminent panelists. So now moving forward, I would like to invite Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, sir, the Executive Director NIDM, to kindly come and deliver the welcome address towards this workshop, sir. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Kopal. First of all, Jai Hind to all the participants. It's a great honor to be part of this major initiative which has been taken to conduct the World Congress on Disaster Management, in which Dr. PG Dhar Chakravarti is chairing the whole issue on the scientific side. We are today, first of all, honored to have such esteemed panelists, Dr. Akhilesh Gupta, Professor Dil Amartunga, Dr. Preeti Bansal, Dr. Krishna Vatsa will be coming at a later time frame, and we will be able to hear their golden thoughts on how to, what is disaster research perspective, what are the needs, and how do we go forward. I will just talk about some challenges that are there which needs to be overcome if we have to have a good quality research in disaster management. So perspectives in disaster research, the status, needs and opportunities is the topic of the day. In that, we are aware that natural hazards and disaster reconnaissance investigations have led to important discoveries that have greatly improved our scientific understanding of hazards and their physical, social, and environmental consequences. Natural hazards such as wind events like tornadoes, cyclones, coastal storms, including wind-generated waves and surges, then earthquakes, which have secondary effects such as shaking-induced damage to buildings, infrastructure, liquefaction of soil, landslides, volcanic eruptions, they all produce an extraordinary volume and quality of data that can inform our preparation and response to future events. So such data are often highly ephemeral or perishable, since they may be altered or removed during rescue and recovery activities, or by natural agents such as precipitation or wind following an event. Therefore, reconnaissance data must be collected soon after an event occurs. And these data are also unique because they inherently include the real world complexities. For example, the interplay between natural habitat, human, and built systems. And it allows us to better understand and quantify the socio-technical dimensions related to damage, related to restoration, and resiliency of the built environment. And such data are difficult to duplicate in a traditional laboratory setting. So, in general, I'll say that disaster research allows professionals in the field to advance existing preparedness, response, and recovery practices. So, it is important to study the impact of disasters on behavioral health, to identify the emergence of psychopathology, and to develop mental health interventions to prevent or mitigate the traumatic effect also. However, there are many ethical and methodological challenges that come up in the way that sometimes dissuade the execution or hinder the execution, such as funding, timely constraints, timing constraints, environmental concerns, then risk of disaster survivors, public perception of conducting research during a time of distress. So all these things need to be taken into account. The primary dilemma faced by researchers is safely balancing the pursuit of answers to their questions with the serious and immediate needs of the survivor. So there are many challenges which comes in the disaster research field. The first is risk benefit analysis. A disaster event, it can impair a person's ability to prepare for or cope with and recover from life stresses. So there may be additional risks also, like survivors participating in a research study causes additional risk. And so all these needs to be carefully considered, how the research should be structured to minimize the potential risk to the participants. Then there's a major issue of funding, major obstacle, because data are typically time sensitive. And like an example, the study by Richardson in 2009, it found out that the urgency of the data collection combined with the chaotic disaster environment hindered many of the authors' ability to find and apply for research funding, which even led to some authors funding portions of the research activities themselves. So future disaster researchers, they are advised to search for funding opportunities and seek input on research design before a disaster strikes, if possible. Sometimes funding opportunities do not become available until after the large scale impact of the disaster is witnessed. Then we have the institutional review board approval that is required. So lack of coordination among the various researchers may lead to research redundancy and participant research burnout. Uh, we are aware after the bombing of the Alfred Mora Federal Building in Oklahoma City in 1995, the University of Oklahoma Health Science Center served as the single entity approving research involving the survivors to protect those affected, maximize the knowledge gained, and improve coordination and minimize the burden on the participants, and facilitated fair dissemination of clinical treatment to the population. So such type of mechanism has to be put in place where someone takes ownership of what all research needs to be done. Participant recruitment is a major problem, which is both ethical and it has to be practical so that this, along with the research, the survivors' basic needs are also met. Then informed consent. Many a times uh, the researchers participate in a research study or involving the disaster survivors, but the research question that are asked, complexity of the choice, they need to be having the consent of the person who's being researched on or whose data has been taken. It is very inaccurate to assume that all disaster survivors have impaired decision making capability, especially when evidence has shown that those with acute stress disorder and post traumatic stress disorder do not generally possess diminished capacity, and hence they should be taken on board with their consent. Then we have emotional distress of the participants. Every time we are talking to a survivor, we are making that survivor go through that emotional trauma once again. I remember in Bhuj earthquake, even after 1 year, when the researchers used to come, and large number of families who had lost many next of kins, near and dear ones, used to break down. And thereafter, a trend started when they said no to anyone coming for any type of questionnaire or any type of survey, because every time someone comes, it has emotional trauma, and that needs to be taken care of. And that is why this issue of selective research in a particular area, and the sample size which has to be segregated and which needs to be diversified, is a very important thing. Then a lot of times we have research where it is done for one time, but that is not the correct way. It has to be a longitudinal research where the survivor or the participant tracking needs to be done to come out with a long-term policy on what needs to be done. What has happened, but unless we draw the right lessons from that, then that whole trauma, that whole loss of property, loss to lives would go waste if we can't prepare the future to cater for that. And hence, proper longitudinal studies over 5 years, 10 years is very much important. Then the safety of the researcher itself. There are many researchers who are not able to bear the stress of the field because of the plight of the people, and they themselves require psychosocial care. So they need to be mentally and physically both strong, and they need to be prepared for what they are going to face. Many times we see cultural sensitivity is not being taken into account. That is a very important thing in disaster research. Every culture has got a different tradition, which has to be known to the researcher before they start interacting, whether physically or through any other media that they're finding. Because unless we follow the tradition of that area, we won't be able to get the right amount of information. Generalizing is a major I'll say drawback of a research, because by collecting a small sample size, then the lab room data interpretation starts, and then we come out with wrong interpretation of the whole thing. This extrapolation needs to be stopped. The generalizing should be based on actuals, and whenever a research is done, the sampling size, the base of the sample, and the selection of the sample has to be done correctly, so that it represents that whole geographical area or community or a particular gender, whichever the research is based on, in the correct sense. So with these issues, I will finish my opening remarks, because I'm keen to hear all the panelists who have come and listen to them. So thank you so much, and I once again welcome everyone. Over to you, Dr. Kopal.
Thank you very much, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, sir. So you have brought out some very important aspects related to disaster research, and these should be looked upon. So thank you very much, sir, for delivering your welcome address. So as Dr. Akhilesh Gupta sir has requested, so now I would like to invite him to deliver his address today. So Dr. Akhilesh Gupta sir is a senior advisor in DST, Government of India, and is also heading the climate change program of DST and coordinating 2 national missions on climate change under National Action Plan on Climate Change. He has published over 185 research papers in various national and international journals and conference proceedings. So, without any further delay, Dr. Akhilesh Gupta, sir, we are keen to hear from you.
Thank you, Dr. Kokal. Good evening to all the distinguished participants, Dr. Dhar Chakravarti ji, Major General Tindal, and Dr. Preeti Vansal, and all the distinguished participants, and Dr. Anil Gupta for this organizing this roundtable on perspective in disaster research, status, needs, and opportunities. I take it as my privilege to share my thoughts today. Uh, I recall the time, in fact, I recall my interaction with Dhar Chakravarti, sir, long time back when disaster management plan was put in place in 2005, and NIDM had started taking a lot of initiative in this area. And maybe in the first disaster management workshop, congress that we had, I don't remember the place, I think it was somewhere in the south, somewhere Hyderabad or somewhere. So, and then, so it was 2008, if I remember correctly, because that was when the NDMA has come up, and then National Disaster Management Plan was put in place. That was a turning point for India in the area of disaster management. Disaster management was considered as one vertical. It used to work in silos, and this silos was broken with this DM plan, and NIDM has very important role to play, and I would say Dhar Chakravarti ji had very important role to play, because that was the time when disaster management had changed its focus from, in fact, disaster management to disaster preparedness. And the focus shifted to preparedness because you need to work to save the lives and property, and not to manage the life and property when this disaster has already struck. So this change of approach itself is very important, and that is how an aggressive plan for training was brought in, where you need more training to disaster managers, and then the connecting and integrating early warning system with disaster management become very relevant, and so therefore when we talk about the preparedness means you are talking about working for saving your lives and property. And when you want to prepare for saving the life and property, then you need to have a lot of understanding of those system. So one area was that we try, that the entire institution has started working, is that first of all, bring disaster management as a horizontal and not vertical. So you need to mainstream. So with this concept of mainstreaming disaster management with all planning process was one that was brought after DM 2005 implementation. So now when we focus on the research part, the research will need a lot of understanding. For example, one understanding should be, okay, what should be the severity of the disaster? So be it cyclone or or thunderstorm or hailstorm or any such kind of disaster. So you need to have accurate predictions of these disasters and then assess the severity of these the event. And once you do that, then you had to work out the damage potential of the event. So how much it will impact, and then only you can plan your disaster management so that you know where it is going to cross. The suppose cyclone is there, where what impact it will have, what potential it has to for the life for the security of life and also the property. So this is so therefore the focus disaster management focus was that connecting the early warning system with the preparedness program, and then thereafter, so pre-disaster activities also are as important as the post-disaster activities, and that is why and so all that to do, we need very strong research base. Now, unfortunately, in fact, I recall the discussion that earlier in many other occasions that although we have given enough focus and enough attention to the training, and that is how you have an IDM, you have IAPA and many institutions giving training for disaster preparedness and management. But we do not have a single institution in the country to undertake the research and policy on natural disaster. And therefore, this is I would say that in my, I would say recommendation is that we must now, and I understand the plan is ready with an IDM, but we must now impress upon the authorities to go forward with setting up a national disaster research and policy, this institute for disaster research and policy. This can be like upgrading an IDM to this level or creating something, a new initiative that is up to government to do it. But in my understanding, I think this is most important. And if this kind of initiative is launched, I think the Department of Science and Technology will support this kind of initiative, because there is a need for going for disaster research and policy. This will go a long way in strengthening the disaster management work in the country, because in this way the fruits of policy formulation and research from this institute will flow down to districts and other level of people, and also it will flow down to various other institutions doing training, because the outcome from this institution will help formulating better training program in the country. So I think this is the I would say need of the hour, and we have enough understanding and we understand the framework of this. This can be done easily. What we need only a little effort in this direction. I think I would stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. First of all, finding out your precious time to come for this very important workshop. Sir, you have a late focus on the points of accuracy of a disaster, then severity, and then damage control by anticipating the potential of the impact. So you have emphasized more on the pre-disaster activities than the post-disaster activities, and that is the domain that requires more research. And as you suggested that one whole institution being dedicated for this purpose, for purpose of disaster research, and I also think it's going to be a major breakthrough in controlling the disasters and managing our disasters for our country. So, sir, thank you very much for your time, and
Thank you.
we are very grateful. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Please allow me to leave. I have another meeting to
Thank you.
attend. So thank you so much
Yes.
for inviting me. Thanks so much.
You were fine. You were there with us since morning. So we bothered you a lot sir, today, entire day. So we are so lucky and so grateful to you.
Thank you.
Since morning. Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So
Thank you,
now,
sir.
now moving further ahead with the agenda, now we have Dr. PG Dhar Chakravarti with us. So, Dr. PG Dhar Chakravarti, sir, is a chairman currently for the Scientific and Technical Committee for the 5th World Congress on Disaster Management that is soon going to be held from 24 to 27 November. Sir has held very important positions as Secretary NDMA, Executive Director NIDM, and Director SDNC. Sir is a member of advisory groups at UNISDR, UNOCHA, UNFCCC, and Sir is a distinguished fellow of TERI and adjunct faculty, TERI University. Sir, now I invite you to kindly deliver your opening remarks for this workshop, sir. So you are on mute, kindly unmute.
Thank you, Kopal, for introducing me. So this is the 7th in the series of 10 webinars we are organizing leading up to the 5th World Congress, which is starting on 24th of November. And these 7 webinars, we discussed a wide range of issues like legal institutional framework for managing pandemics like COVID. Then we are strengthening humanitarian systems in South Asia on green recovery. We had a complex and systemic disasters on conference on issues on global public health, then education during this COVID, and a whole lot of community resilience. And we had 3 more webinars are in the pipeline. So, and these webinars we had experts from all the continents and so many countries attending, and added so much of value to our knowledge on this subject. So today's webinar is very, very interesting and very, very relevant. So we are going to discuss research on a subject which is yet to emerge as an independent discipline of its own, but which is one of the most multidisciplinary, subject on thing, which covers so many disciplines. So I counted there about 52 disciplines, major disciplines, across the spectrum of sciences, like earth sciences and space sciences, with the meteorology, hydrology.
Sir, you have been muted again, sir.
So the whole gamut of sciences that I was saying, that about 52 major disciplines which are currently involved in disaster research, involving the earth sciences, the space sciences, the engineering, and the whole branches of technology, civil engineering, communication technology, and so on. We have the medical sciences and different branches of medical sciences, emergency medicine, orthopedics, and other departments which are involved. Then we have the social sciences, whole range of social sciences like economics, political science, etc. We have the agricultural sciences, the environmental sciences, ecology. We have the management sciences looking into different aspects. The security aspects, those who are doing the military and the response, and the police and all that. And we have the legal sciences also, the whole legal disciplines now, the whole branch of laws are also involved. We have the material sciences. With the media, we have the policy studies, policy sciences. Then we have even the diplomatic sciences, and the international diplomacy. You call it disaster diplomacy. The whole branch of about 52 major disciplines across all spectrums of sciences are involved in this research. So that's what I'm saying, that it is the most multidisciplinary subject. Probably no other subject would be having such a multidimensional and multidisciplinary aspect as disaster management is. Now, when you say multidisciplinary, that means, and the research on the disaster management, taking place in all these disciplines, and you find that when you do research, then what is actually, somebody says research is knowing more and more about less and less. Then you are highly specialized into a particular subject, and you are very specialized. So you are very, researching on a particular aspect, in a very specialized aspect, and you are not looking into other aspects. So the research in these disciplines sometimes are so specialized that unless you are specialized in the subject, you are not able to understand what actually is the research going on. So that is what is necessary. That is what we call, it is a multidisciplinary. But the interdisciplinary, that means when one discipline is interacting with another discipline. For example, if you are specializing in gender studies or the studies on the children, which is the aspect of the social science, then you know that what is the requirement of the women and children in the reconstruction of the buildings, which engineers would be doing. So unless the engineers has a perspective of social sciences, he would not be able to design the building properly. So that's what you find the major interdisciplinary research centers that are emerging. And I had an opportunity to attend one in Karlsruhe University in Germany, and where the experts came from, one from University College of London, and she said that she's an engineer, but she's also doing research in psychology to understand, the interaction between the, engineering and the psychology. And I was quite amazed to see their interest. So the intersections of the knowledge, how the knowledge is interacting with each other, and what we call interdisciplinary research, that is what is taking place, and that is not taking place adequately. We have a lot of multidisciplinary research, but we have lack of interdisciplinary research. So I was trying to find out that where actually the interdisciplinary research is taking place. So I was involved sometimes in the Colorado University, and I was also the Emergency Management Institute in Maryland, with which the NIDM had a collaboration for about 5-6 years. And I had the opportunity to attend the higher education conference, which the Maryland EMI, they organize once in a year in the September, October, where all the major universities of the America, USA, they assemble together and discuss the interdisciplinary, the intersectionality of the researches, how research in one discipline is going to benefit another, and how researchers can communicate each other so that the knowledge, they transcends the boundaries. And that is what is going on. And I found this kind of interdisciplinary research are very few. There are a lot of multidisciplinary research, very few international. So we made a survey of what are the centers which are doing it. And I found to my surprise, Japan and China, there were a large number of multidisciplinary research centers. In India, this subject is very new, and then very few, only 4 or 5 centers in JNU is one entry where we find that SCDR is doing some interdisciplinary research. But that is again on a social science, and the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, they are doing entirely on the social science background. IIT Roorkee, they are doing the Disaster Management Mitigation Institute. They are doing engineering, disaster management on the engineering aspect. So we need to have some kind of research where the disciplines should speak to each other, and that is what we call, transdisciplinary research. Professor Gupta said in the beginning that, we have to transcend the discipline. We see that how the disciplines will interact with each other, and how we really, so that the disaster management emerges as a kind of a discipline of its own. Now it is footed, it has a multiple fits across disciplines, but how it should emerge as a subject of its own, where all the knowledge is integrated into one, and that is still in the making, that is still evolving and evolving. So when we find a research, we find that a lot of knowledge is being created, and I would classify this kind of knowledge in 3 broad categories. The one is the scientific knowledge across all the disciplines, where the formal kind of a knowledge is taking place. In find, that may be social science, that may be agricultural science, or whatever science it is. So that's a kind of a scientific knowledge, and that is being generated. Then secondly, we find in this field, we have the traditional knowledge, because the traditional or indigenous knowledge, because, our communities They have been dealing with the disasters for ages, for centuries, and they have developed a knowledge about the hazards, about the vulnerabilities, about all these issues, and they have learned a kind of a coping mechanism with the extreme climatic events, how to adapt with that. So that knowledge is also important, just as scientific knowledge is important. So this knowledge of the traditional knowledge and the knowledge of the indigenous knowledge of the communities, and which is, there is a great reservoir of such knowledge in communities, which unfortunately is disappearing very fast. So we need to capture those knowledge, document this knowledge. Only a lot of research is required. And the third aspect of this knowledge is what I call the applied knowledge or action research, where we apply the knowledge, whatever scientific knowledge we gather, and we try to apply this into make certain policies and then prepare certain projects, programs, activities, implement it on the ground. And in the process of implementation, we find that there is a lot of gaps between what we have done, the scientific and the knowledge. So the action knowledge is also important. So we have to integrate research just as across disciplines. So also we have to increase research from the science and policy and action, and also the traditional knowledge we have. So that is another aspect. The third aspect that I wanted to bring out is that we have a lot of knowledge is available, but there are very, very critical gaps in our knowledge in disaster research. Critical gaps in the knowledge on the disasters. For example, we do not have a very strong statistical database on the hazards, on the vulnerabilities, different dimensions of the hazard. For example, earthquake. Now we have this information on seismicity and seismological map, but we look into this kind of data is available 1 million resolution, that earthquake map. Similarly, landslide resolutions are very high resolution, not a very macro level we are having mapping, but at a detailed level, at the micro level, if you have to do this kind of hazard, we don't have data available. And if you look into the physical aspect, physical vulnerability aspect, physical vulnerability, for example, we have the bridges and roads. How many roads are vulnerable? How many bridges are vulnerable? Whether these bridges will withstand in a major disaster like earthquake or not? How strong is the bridge? How strong are the buildings? How strong are the multi-storied buildings that are coming up in our cities? Do you have the data available? Whether this building has been constructed as per the earthquake-resistant technology on that? Whether this disaster will withstand the pressure of the... So this kind of data are not available. Similarly, on the disaster, actual physical disasters, for example, how many disasters are taking place in India? We are still depending on the international and global database, MDAT, based in Leuven in Belgium. And that lady Debarati Sapir, who also would be speaking in our conference, and she set up that MDAT database. And that database says that only 10 disasters where 10 persons or more die, or 100 or more are injured or affected, that is their disaster. But there are so many disasters where less than 10 persons die, small disasters, minor. So where is the database? Where is the national statistical database on disasters in India? How many disasters are taking place annually in India? If you look into the Ministry of Home's annual report, till 2007, they were calculating, and the total number was coming something like 27, 28 disasters. They were giving a list all across. Now, there are so many disasters which they are not doing it, and that's why from 2008, they have stopped publishing that particular annexure in the annual report of the Ministry of Home Affairs. We have been trying to develop a national statistical database on disasters, which is not there. So I think disaster is an area where a lot of research is taking place, a lot of multidisciplinary research is taking place, very new interdisciplinary research is taking place, and the transdisciplinary research for creating a separate discipline on disaster management, that is still in the process of evolving. And there are huge data gaps on our research, which should be identified properly according to our priorities and needs. And I think this workshop would be good if you can follow it up with further publication, what are actually the research gaps in there, and how should we prioritize it, and who would be doing what research. There should be some discussion among all the academic and scientific communities, so that some of the priority research areas of research are attended by that, and we are able to address the research gaps to some extent. So with these opening remarks, I'll be I'll be closing here, and so I'll be waiting to hear, the views of the other experts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. You have in fact taken us to a very important point, emphasized a very important point, that there has been a multidisciplinary research is going on to a very vast extent, but there is a need of interdisciplinary research. There's a need of the hour at this point of time. So thank you very much, sir, for putting up your opening remarks. And now moving ahead with the panel, now we have Dr. Neeraj Sinha with us. So Dr. Neeraj Sinha, sir, is the Senior Advisor of DST and Senior Advisor SNTU at Jharkhand and Puducherry, Niti Ayog. And I would like to invite Dr. Neeraj Sinha, sir, to kindly come and deliver your address for the workshop.
Yeah, thank you so much. A big thank you to Mr. Anil Gupta, first of all, for having invited me, as usual, in one of his very important events. And of course, to all his colleagues, including Dr. Kopal Verma, who is hosting this event. See, natural disasters and disaster management have been very close to my heart, because quite some time ago, when I used to work in the office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, and this was in the year 2002, I had dealt with a subject which was a little out of the ordinary, and it was not the focus of the government or any major agency, because although it is labeled as a disaster, it is an ecological disaster, and I'm talking about oil spill management. And whenever there is a big tanker which suddenly starts leaking because of various reasons, it could be an accident, it could be a terrorist act, it could be anything. And when the tanker starts spilling oil on the high seas, then thankfully no human lives are lost, but aquatic damage is very big. The ecological damage is huge. The loss of revenue to the fishermen, to the tourism industry in the cases of our coastal cities, be it in India, be it abroad, is also not insignificant. So we had, we means the PS's office had developed a report on oil spill management. And after 2 meetings of the Committee of Secretaries, we were able to, and that was the very time when the tsunami of December 2004 had happened. And that had suddenly created an importance and urgency in the Government of India to create an agency which is so single-handedly responsible to manage disasters. And that is how the National Disaster Management Authority came into being, the NDMA as we call it. And after these 2 serious meetings, we were able to give the importance that this subject deserved. I'm talking about oil spill management, and we were able to bring it into the ambit of the NDMA. So globally and in India, there has been a paradigm shift in disaster management, as we call it, from a response and relief centric approach to a prevention, preparedness and mitigation centric approach. Now this calls for holistic, integrated and inclusive strategies with an effective use of S&T, interventions and innovations across a range of disciplines. Now this range could be space technology, ecosystem and atmospheric studies, medical science, food, geotechnical, construction and industrial, to name a few. India is prone to multiple disasters, as we know. And due to its wide range of environmental, geological and developmental variations, we are very prone to all kinds of disasters created by cyclones, by earthquakes. Thankfully, we don't have the hurricanes here, but the cyclones that hit us in the coastal states are equally damaging. And we say that almost 54% of the country's land is prone to significant earthquakes, with floods frequently hitting more than 40 million hectares of land. And this does not include the urban and the flash floods. The flash floods, as we know, keep happening in Himachal and Uttarakhand and other places. Now we have a long coastline of 7,500 kilometers. I was just talking about oil spill management. And this is prone to cyclonic storms. It is prone to ecological disasters like oil spills. And besides this, we have disasters like landslides, we have droughts, we have sand and dust storms, and human-induced disasters, as I call it, such as fires, and there are environmental changes because of anthropogenic activities. So the list is long. So having said that, I would like to emphasize here that India has made a giant stride in dealing with the occurrence of major disasters, particularly floods, earthquakes, cyclones, and of course the tsunami. So together with reducing the risk of disasters by adopting a strategic approach, we have also enacted the Disaster Management Act, as we know, of the year 2005, which has enabled a holistic and proactive approach to risk management and for India to respond in a coordinated manner whenever we are hit by any disaster. Now, there is a disaster management policy. This is dated 2009, and it has provided broader guidance to the framing of national and state guidelines. Now, we all know that the Prime Minister of India is the chairman of the NDMA, and the NDMA is mandated for overall coordination of policy and response actions to deal with disaster management. NIDM, I should definitely mention, where Anil Gupta ji and I'm sure Dr. Kopal Verma are working, which has been hosting these very interesting events. Now, the NIDM is the Government of India's apex think tank, the way I know it, on disaster management. And it is mandated for research, policy planning, and capacity building, including training, education, documentation, publication, and dissemination activities, both within and outside the country. So, and finally, the Prime Minister's Agenda 10 on disasters risk management that he gave during the 7th Asian Ministerial Conference on DRR, that is disaster risk reduction in 2016, has called for a greater use of science and technology and mobile technologies for developing a network of institutions for disaster research. Now here I will like to focus on disaster research and especially the institution that is supposed to be working on it. Frankly, when I look at the entire SNT system in the country, all the laboratories in the government system, including those of the Department of Atomic Energy, the Department of Defense R&D, the Department of Scientific and Industrial Research, to name a few, and of course we have the Ministry of Earth Sciences, we have the Department of Science and Technology. Disaster research happens in quite a few of them. I wouldn't say that it doesn't happen, but I've always felt the need, I don't know if I'm correct in saying this, maybe there already is an institute, an R&D institute, but I don't find any single R&D institute in the country which is supposed to do dedicatedly disaster research. And I know that in the NDMA's charter, there are probably 10 odd disasters or maybe more. I don't remember the numbers now. But I don't find a single institute which is actually looking at all of those. Now, I could be, maybe I stand corrected, but that is what I have gathered out of my own knowledge of working in the essence system. So it is high time that the Government of India, through its various arms, network. I wouldn't advocate creation of new institutes. I mean, we need to amalgamate, we need to synergize, we need to bring together the disparate efforts that are happening in the Indian government SSD system, in the Indian academia, maybe in the Indian industry also, for looking at disaster research and disaster science and technology measures. So having said that, and I shouldn't also ignore the very important role that the India Meteorological Department of the Ministry of Earth Sciences is already playing. And we have a lot of oceanographic institutes, including the National Institute of Oceanography of the CSIR. We have the National Institute of Ocean Technology of the Ministry of Earth Sciences. And to name a few, there could be a lot more which are not coming to my mind right away. But in the Niti Aayog, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Niti Aayog here, we would definitely strongly support any initiative by any ministry or department of the Government of India which looks at disaster research, disaster SNT in a holistic manner. Now, this is a thought I want to leave with the NIDM, with the NDMA, and of course the Ministry of Home Affairs as well, to have something which can look at this in a dedicated manner. So having said that, now I just want to highlight digital innovations which are very important in mitigating any kind of disaster, and ecological and earth dynamics, civil engineering, especially buildings that should be made earthquake safe, and all kinds of building bylaws have already been enacted, but we need to ensure that they are implemented in the right earnest. And whenever there is an earthquake that hits us, the damage is reduced to the extent possible. So construction practices are very important. Civil engineering techniques are very important. Building codes and bylaws for resistant housing exist, as I just said, but we need to improve upon them from time to time. And this should be a part of the training that we give to our colleagues, the officers, the engineers, and the various stakeholders involved in infrastructure development and construction. Now, disaster impact assessment is also a component in the environmental clearance and environmental impact assessment process to ensure disaster safety and resilience of major developmental projects. Now, having said this, I just wanted to highlight in the end the road ahead. Now, we say that India is a key player, not only in various S&T arenas other than disaster, but in disaster as well, and disaster mitigation as well. And we have emerging fronts of innovation in disaster risk mitigation, that is DRR as we call it, disaster response and cooperation, ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, community-centric preparedness, mainstreaming DRR into development, and so on and so forth. Now, the opportunities of synergy and integration between the DRR strategies on the one hand and the national and state action plans on the other hand on climate change need to be harnessed in a very planned and in a very phased manner. And this should be done. I'm sure it is already being done, but this needs to be accelerated to the extent possible. Now, disaster management plans have been prepared at the state and the district levels, which require each and every department and the local bodies, like, for example, panchayats and village level workers, to come up with their disaster management plans and implement them. S&T popularization at the local level. Now, this is very important. While we talk about S&T interventions in Delhi and Bombay, in the various labs, in the metros, in the tier 2 cities, we really do not know about the S&T penetration for disaster risk mitigation in the Gram Panchayat level, in the villages. So what I would suggest is that S&T popularization at the local level, global information system, environmental modeling applications, communication effectiveness, promotion and integration of innovations, all these things are very important, and they should strengthen the local level efforts as and when a disaster hits us. They could be of any kind. Now, these are key to a national level resilience against disasters. Public-private partnership in the end, I would say, it needs to be a part of the overall process, and integrating common science and understanding towards developing a holistic culture of safety and prevention, integrated as the core principle of the PM's Agenda 10, as we call it, on disaster risk mitigation, is extremely important. So, with these words, I would once again compliment the NIDM to at least bring these subjects for discussion on the national agenda and get people to at least talk and deliberate on them, so that DRR, any kind of S&T related to DRR, gets the importance that it deserves. And in the end, I'll just re-emphasize the importance of having one institute, or alternatively integrating the efforts of the various institutes in the Government of India, in the industry, in the academic system, to work on disaster risk reduction in a very phased and a very effective manner. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your enlightening deliberation, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, you have pointed out that the institutes like NIDM, then CSIR, IMD, in their own potential, they are doing their work, like they're playing their part in disaster research. But yes, so far there is no such institution wholeheartedly dedicated for this kind of purpose, for this purpose of disaster research. So this is very important. And then you talked about the S&T penetration to the local level, at the Gram Panchayat level, because it is the community which which are the first responders to any kind of disasters, and that is why they should be very well versed and familiar with the basics of a disaster management policy and plan. So thank you very much, sir, for taking out your precious time and coming for this very important endeavor. So thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Big thank you to NIDM, to Gupta ji, and to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now moving further ahead with our panel discussion, now we have Dr. Preeti Bansal. I'm so sorry, ma'am, because we have to shuffle the our schedule a bit because of yeah. So we have Dr. Preeti Bansal next. She is an advisor in Scientist G and HOD, Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India. Ma'am has vast experience of 28 years with a demonstrated history of working in the telecommunication industry, government policy making and plan implementation, disaster risk reduction, artificial intelligence, and sustainable development. Ma'am is skilled in management, leadership, project management, business development, and strategy. No, so now I welcome Dr. Preeti Bansal for your kind deliberation, ma'am. Ma'am, are you here?
Yeah, yes, Dr. Kopal, thank you very much for making this favor. And I have to rush for a meeting, so um, without entering into all those formalities of thanking the NITM and all, I would like to say that Professor Dhar Chakravarti, Dr. Dhar Chakravarti is an authority in disaster management. And he has very nicely pointed out all the topics and the cross-disciplinary approach towards DRR. And of course, my previous speakers, Mr. Neeraj Sinha, Dr. Gupta and Mr. Bindal have also pointed out about so many aspects of DRR and the existing requirement and capability of science, technology and innovation research for DRR. So I would like to sum up all those things, and I would like to say my points in three quick points. The first one is the existing setup. If we talk about the existing setup, then the policy framework is already in place. We have plan, we have institutional capacity generated in terms of national and state disaster management authorities, response forces, NITM as Institute for Capacity Building, and also the capacity building grant in term as proposed by the 14th and of course by the 15th Finance Commission. So the institutional capacity is very much in place. If we talk about the international framework, so then we have Paris Climate Agreement, we have SDG, Millennium Goals, and also the Sendai framework. So we are very well placed from the policy point of view. But we are talking about the research and development team. For this, I think we need to think about the existing technological capacity deficit. All across the world, if we visit the ITU or the UNICEF or the UN OSHA or whichever organization, internationally, all of them are working to identify the disruptive technologies like AI, ML, the big data analytics, the sensor, IoT and the sensor-based technologies, and they are working in these areas and they are extensively using this for the disaster management. If we come to the Indian setup, there is no dearth of startup and the industry ecosystem who are having these kind of capabilities. The requirement is how to use it for the disaster risk reduction. For using this for the disaster risk reduction, again, the digitalization of Indian economy is a very well, this is a boosting factor to come on board for and adopt these technologies. The question is how? If we talk about the research and development, then the Disaster Management Act give the mandate to NITM for research as well. Not only the capacity building and training, but also do the research. So NITM is well equipped in terms of mandate to take up this responsibility. Now, what is the way forward? The way forward is that involve this SMT ecosystem, may it be in the academia, Academia, you see all the ITs, TERI, private, non-private, top institutes, they are having good incubation system, they are having good R&D system. So involve those academia, involve all those platforms like Startup India, Skill India, all those things, all those good tools provided by the government, and also the policies. If you see the new policy on geospatial data sharing by DST, if you go to the drone policy, all these are enabling policies who are coming up. So NITM can take lead to use all these tools which are available, being offered by the ecosystem, integrate all those things together, stitch them together, and go forward for R&D-led DRR. The capacity building thing, as far as training is concerned, the training-based initiative we are already taking. But non-training based initiative, which extensively involve the capacity building using the R&D in the science and technology, translating them, and also making it market-driven. Market-driven in a sense, you know, the people are using the drone technology, but someone have to pull it to use it for the data creation for the DRR, feeding it into the prediction modeling for the forecasting and early warning, and using it extensively. So if at all we want to use it, we have to have a multiple collaboration through using all these tools, and as well as using the crowdsource kind of funding, wherein the industry is a partner. So I think if we can create this kind of framework, and NITM can play a good role in this, can lead this drive, then I do not see any reason that we cannot succeed in R&D driven STI intervention for DI. So I stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. First of all, it would have been really good if the to speak more, because we would have loved to hear more from you, because in such a short span of time we have summarized the entire agenda of this workshop, this very important topic we are talking today, and you have kind of represented a roadmap for NIDM. Yes, that NIDM has a lot of work to do, and thank you for the encouragement, and I'm sure that NIDM is going to walk on that path and will do the needful. So thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much for taking out your precious time and giving your deliberation to the workshop.
So thank you very much, Dr. Kopal, and please allow me to leave the meeting. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So now moving further ahead with our panel discussion, we have our next speaker, Professor Delanthi Amratunga, ma'am. So, ma'am, I'm so sorry we had to shuffle a lot with our schedule for today. So, Professor Delanthi Amratunga, ma'am, is a professor at Disaster Risk Management at the University of Huddersfield, UK. She is an internationally renowned leading expert in disaster resilience with over 30 years of experience in the higher education sector. So we are exhilarated to hear from you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you. First of all, my heartfelt thanks to Professor Gupta for inviting me to contribute to this very important discussion. Of course, Professor Gupta, is a friend and a dear colleague, so I'm very pleased to be part of this very important discussion. So I suppose, just to to tell you very briefly on why I think that, I can contribute to this very important discussion. For example, of course, I'm representing the UK at the UNDRR, European Science and Technology Advisory Group, in providing scientific and technical support for 56 European and Central Asian countries. And also, I was a member of a UNDRR expert review group for development of a new global disaster risk reduction research agenda towards 2030 and beyond. And also, I'm a steering committee member of UK Alliance for Disaster Research, which is actually a contact point for the UK government seeking the best UK science input, and also a steering committee member of UK Royal Academy of Engineering. So in that sense, I think, I'm trying my best to do the justice for this session today. Of course, there are many drivers for disaster risk. The net effect of these drivers is very complex, and the speakers before me actually highlighted this in quite a bit of detail. So, but what I need to emphasize is that there is relatively weaker interaction among research community, industry, and policy making. Again, the core of this workshop team. So what does this mean? You can actually sort of see a direct quotation from Sendai framework here, which actually sort of says the Sendai framework actually stresses the importance of science and technology development for DRR, and it makes a very strong call for science to support the understanding of disaster risk and to promote risk-informed decision making. This is actually the hypothesis that I want to put forward for my short talk. So in that sense, the brief outline for today's talk is the role of science and technology and research in DRR, and also how Sendai framework emphasizes this very important link, and then what does the new agenda for research, science and policy on DRR will look like, and also what sort of opportunities that do exist, so that as direct contribution to this very important dialogue. Importance of science and technology. Of course, the science and technology accelerates the progress, and they create new insights and methods. And of course, it helps to solve all problems and so on and so forth. And of course, what we really need to emphasize is the importance of having evidence-based information in order to increase the understanding of the underlying causes of disaster risk. Again, several speakers before me emphasized this point, so I'm so glad that I'm also pitching the same idea here in quite a bit of detail. We can't actually forget in this scenario the importance of the Sendai framework. Again, I'm not going to go into details about Sendai framework. We all are very familiar with that. Sendai framework actually recognizes the inability to understand the managed systematic risk as a challenge. So again, Sendai framework is very important reference point in this particular scenario. Of course, the Sendai framework has 4 priorities. We all know what they are. The priority 1 is understanding risk, and then priority 2 is strengthening the governance. The 3rd priority is investment, and the 4th priority is build back better. So with that, I think it is fair to say that the research and science is in the heart of Sendai. There's absolutely no doubt about it. For example, science and technology has always been related to DRR, but however, a great momentum has been created, especially after this Sendai framework. So in that sense, the role of science is formalized in the first of the Sendai framework's priorities, which is actually the understanding disaster risk. And it actually includes unprecedented emphasis on the role of science in understanding and delivering risk reduction. This is really important, the term unprecedented. So they have actually gone up to a lot of length in emphasizing the role of science and research in that sense. But this ambition actually goes beyond the capacity of any one science approach. This is really important. Again, several speakers before me emphasized the need to have multidisciplinary and the interdisciplinary working. This is actually the point that I want to emphasize and link to that key issue. Science is again in the heart of Sendai. Again, it is not my intention to read these quotes, but these are direct extractions from the Sendai framework, which very clearly identifies the role of science in Sendai. For example, paragraph 23, it talks about understanding of disaster risk in all its dimensions of vulnerability. And you can see page 20, paragraph 25, it emphasizes the need to enhance the scientific and technical work on DRR and its mobilization through the coordination of existing networks. And again, in paragraph 23, it talks about leverage for the purpose of pre-disaster risk assessment. Again, Dr. Gopal emphasized about the pre-disaster risk assessments and also the post-disaster aspects. So these are the direct quotations from Sendai framework, which is, in my view, very powerful in emphasizing the need to have research agendas and science in DRR. So if you go to the priority one of Sendai framework, which is actually linked to understanding disaster risk, it actually identifies research and technology gaps and set recommendations for research priority areas. And also it talks about systematic risks, under the climate of COVID and other natural hazards. Getting an understanding about systematic risk is extremely important. And also it promotes scientific research of disaster risk patterns, causes and effects. And also it promotes the application of science and technology to decision making. This actually again provides that very important link between science, policy and decision making. And also it emphasizes the need to have evidence-based approach in support of disaster related decision making, supported by proper dissemination mechanisms on risk information and also provision of guidance and methodologies. So you can see what I want to emphasize here is that the priority one of Sendai is very much linked to the importance of having evidence-based research agendas for DRR. So in that sense, what are I want to emphasize several key agenda points for research, science and policy community on DRR initiatives, again, based on my involvement and interventions as I identified before. So I have 11 key points to highlight, which I hope will be useful. The first one is to focus more on interlinkages between DRR, sustainable development, climate change and adaptation. The timing of this particular point is really important, whereas in the UK, we are still actually in the closing stages of the COP conference. So in that sense, it is really important to have these linkages between these very important philosophies. And also the second point that I want to emphasize is to have a holistic, all hazard risk-based approach. So we can't actually look into hazards and risk in isolation. We need to be able to look into it from the point of view of holistic approaches and all hazard approaches. And the third point that I want to emphasize is the need to conduct periodic review of knowledge needs. This is very important. We can't actually just do one-off review and to take it as it is. We really need to reflect the needs and to capture snapshots in every few years down the line. So that is the third point that I would like to emphasize. And the fourth point that I want to say here is the need to deepen our understanding of evolving risk, the root causes of disasters and their impact. In that sense, the need to have actionable research that is useful, usable, and used. This is again very, very important. Actionable research which is useful, usable, and used. And also there were a lot of talk prior to my interventions about the link to the link that needs to be there between science and policy. So my fifth point is around that, the need to have the links between the scientists and the researchers with the policymakers. So they must work with policymakers and practitioners in terms of co-producing research that can be used effectively. Scientists and the researchers shouldn't be working in isolation, in my view. And Also linking with that, the sixth point that I want to emphasize is the importance of having research users in the early stages of developing research and technology. We shouldn't be using the research users as a kind of a dissemination mechanism. They need to be included in the research programs from the very beginning. So including research users in the early stages of research programs is very important. And then the seventh point is scientific advice needs to be provided to decision makers through close collaboration and dialogue. This has to be a two-way process. Again, a really important point that I want to emphasize. And the last 3 points that I want to emphasize is the point 9 is using the expanding science and technology evidence base to support capacity building and ensure the capacity development for DRR, which has to be interdisciplinary, shared across international boundaries, and has to be demand driven. Again, the focus of international boundaries is very important, because the disasters do not respect any boundaries, be it country, national, regional, or local. So in that sense, the disaster research needs to be very much cutting across international boundaries, in my view. And the next point that I want to emphasize is the importance of having international publications which are being peer reviewed, and also via that to extensive sharing of data and results. So these processes are very critical in sharing very much up-to-date research information. And then linking with that, the last point is the need to support open access, multi-hazard data platforms, so that we all across the entire globe can be benefited. So that is actually the 11th agenda point that I want to emphasize. So moving on to sort of the opportunities, I want to highlight 5 key opportunities here in terms of importance. The first one is actually link research, education, and action. The second one is integrate all hazards, stakeholders and disciplines. And the third point that I want to emphasize is the need to collaborate regionally and globally. And the fourth opportunity is to facilitate policy dialogue, knowledge sharing, and capacity development. And the fifth and the final point I want to emphasize is the need to develop flexible and customizable education programs. So let me try to go through them in very quick succession. So the first one is actually link research, education, and action. So there I want to emphasize 3 very important points here. The role in creating and implementing policies that are built on the best available knowledge. Again, linking research and action, I want to emphasize. And also in filling the policy science gap, which needs closing with research that can be translated to action. So again, the role of policymaking and the research users I want to highlight here. And then the need to provide and to communicate the actionable knowledge to wider audiences. So these are the 3 high-level points that I want to emphasize under linking research, education, and action. So the second point I want to emphasize is integrate all hazard stakeholders and disciplines. We are in an era where the whole world has suffered terribly from the COVID pandemic. So that itself is such a good example, a living example that demonstrates the need to have a multidisciplinary approach, and also supported by multi-stakeholders in addressing problems from the field and caliber solutions. So I think the current environment that we all are living in is such a good example to emphasize the point 2 that I want to mention here. And the point 3 is the need to collaborate regionally and globally. In that sense, I suppose Professor Gupta's invitation to me, living in 8,000 miles away from India, living in the UK, is actually a good example to demonstrate this, to need to collaborate regionally and globally, and thereby to continue the regional and global initiatives that promote collaboration. In that sense, international cooperation and the global partnership is very important. The world is becoming smaller and smaller. So in that sense, there need to be global higher education networks supported by various other organizations, and also with effective coordination mechanisms for science integration. So the fourth point, one before the last, what I want to emphasize here is the need to facilitate policy dialogue, knowledge sharing and capacity building. This can be done in several ways, and I have identified 5 potential avenues here. The first one is to have a greater priority on sharing and disseminating scientific information. Again, I emphasize the need to have open access, having peer-reviewed publications. So in that sense, open access has to be a priority, so that we all can share very much up-to-date scientific information. And in doing so, we need to use the language that can be understood by the policymakers. If we are not doing it, that means the new research will be a waste. So in that sense, the continuous dialogue with policymakers is really important. In that sense, there need to be an aggregator of knowledge to improve access and focus on quality. Quantity is not the issue. Quality is what matters. And also in developing a common language that we all can understand. And the final point that I want to emphasize is the need to develop flexible and customizable programs. The term customizable is really important. For example, I think again, Professor Anil Gupta highlighted about disaster research is a kind of an immature discipline as a kind of a new discipline. So I suppose that is actually a very good reason. So in that sense, expanding the field is very important. But perhaps I think it is fair to say that there's a lack of young professionals coming into this area. So in that sense, we really need to actually develop demand-led programs to meet employer needs. At the moment, there's a disconnection between the two. In that sense, there's a high need to develop flexible and customizable programs. So this is actually the 5 points that I want to highlight in terms of developing a roadmap in linking research directions in disaster risk reduction. So just to conclude, what I want to highlight is actually to deepen the understanding of our knowledge on risk and its root causes. Actionable research that is useful is needed, usable and used. I will repeat that sentence again. Research that is useful, that is needed, usable and used. So in that sense, there's a need to for the scientists and the researchers to work together with policymakers and practitioners. And also the last 2 points I want to highlight, and they are the need to scientific advice to decision makers through close collaboration and dialogue with more focused attention on interlinkages between DRR, sustainable development, and the climate change. And in doing so, there's a need to have a holistic and all-hazard approach, risk-based and problem-solving approach to address the multifactorial and interdependent nature of the disaster risk chain to achieve improved disaster risk reduction. These are some of the key points that I want to highlight at top level in terms of picking up for the road map development without actually limiting myself to specific hazards, but looking into the holistic way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Delanti. So first of all, we are very immensely grateful for your patience throughout the workshop. So we are very grateful for that. And ma'am, you have pointed out a term called actionable research and knowledge, and it is really, really impactful because you mentioned it as useful, usable, and used. A research that is required is something usable and used. And the 11-point agenda for research, science, and policy that you have put forward, and I would say that it has been so profoundly and precisely formulated that it can in itself be a very deep, in-depth part of research. So thank you very much, ma'am, for being patient and for taking out your time and to share your very precious deliberation with us. So moving forward, Professor Gupta sir, should I
Actually, I was waiting for Krishna Vatsaji, and I think his meeting is not yet over. So what we do, we'll have a brief reflection from Dr. Abhijit, and then we'll
Yes, sir.
request our ED and IDM and Dr. Chakravarti sir for their closing words. Yeah.
All right.
And
So,
in case Dr. Vatsa joins by that time, we'll have his address.
sure, sir, sure. So now I would like to invite Dr. Abhijit Dwivedi. He'll be representing Special Center for Disaster Research, JNU. So, Dr. Abhijit, all stage is all yours.
Thank you, ma'am. First of all, on behalf of SCDR, Special Center for Disaster Research, JNU, I welcome all the dignitaries and who have joined today for deliberation on a very important topic on perspectives in disaster research, status, need, and opportunities. Today's deliberation have largely, because I was thought to be giving a kind of opening remark, so I haven't, not as a resource person I shall be speaking, but I will be making general points as such what has been deliberated over the period of time. My point is that we need to have what is a major challenge in field of disaster research is first recognition of disaster research as a field, as a separate discipline of knowledge, wherein people from different branches and which shall be interacting with other branches of knowledge. So how that evolution shall take place, and if we see at global level from a pre-Yokohama phase to the phase wherein the Sendai framework is being implemented, we have this 30-year journey almost have brought to us a lot of new things to us, and the disaster research as a field of knowledge has also traveled a lot. And at India, we can say that since the formulation of the Disaster Management Act in 2005 and prior to it 2-3 more acts were also brought in India. So from that point of time to the present phase, the disaster research in India has also proceeded very fast, and it has also entered into new dimensions of research. If I would like to say that the key challenge for disaster research is to develop kind of people who are actually a kind of reflective practitioners. So practitioners who are working in the field of disaster management, how can they be more reflective in understanding and how disasters have to be led when merely moving beyond their skilled roles as and defined set of roles. And what is the second part is that how can academicians be more engaged with the practice which is taking place. So beyond this difference between these two perceived chambers of where one is working in the field of practice and the other is working in the field of research, how to integrate both of these things is a key challenge. And SNT has a very important place in the disaster research. The social sciences also has a very, very critical role in evolving a more sustainable model of disaster management also, and also disaster risk reduction. So the angles of culture which Professor Anil Gupta has very initially highlighted when he was talking about the community initiatives and how social sciences come into picture. So those are also very relevant. And if we see what Professor Corentil, who was a professor of sociology at Chicago, and how and one of the leading professors in field of disaster sociology. So what he says about disasters and how disasters have to be seen not merely as a sort of geographical phenomena or merely some kind of man-made disaster, but as a social phenomena also, and how new kind of norms are required to be put in place when a disaster takes place. So if the normal norms which are existing in the periods which are of not disasters are different from the norms which come into place when disasters takes place, can the research methodologies and methods of disaster research which are being used normally, research methods which are normally being used, can they be applied in field of disaster research, and can they do justice to the field of disaster research as such? So that remains also a very critical question which needs to be analyzed. Second part is that when Professor Chakravarti was saying that there are some institutions which work with respect to disasters when only 10 or more number of people have died. So if we see how we are going to take forward the definition of disaster, when shall we be recognizing something as disaster? Can COVID now be called as a disaster? Whether when it was a disaster when the COVID-19 outbreak took place, whether at that point if it was a disaster, and now can we say it is a disaster? Or it has moved to a different tenure, a different phase, and can all phases of COVID-19 be called disasters equally? Or when the waves took place, those specific phases shall be called as disaster. So a new kind of understanding has to also come, and that has to move beyond the field of law. That cannot be very legalistic definition, technocratic definition of disaster. And there also research needs to be taken place. So there are a lot of aspects which needs to be taken into account. Further, business groups and business communities and communities should also be made a very important stakeholders. Identification of all stakeholders in disaster research and what is their due role, that has to be also given more nuanced analysis, and a more layered perspective has to come with that regard, rather than a kind of preaching attitude wherein certain sections are state driven. Disaster management plans have to be they have to be the disaster management has to be freed from the clutches of the state in that sense. That doesn't mean that the state is some sort of evil, but the state along with other sections of communities, other stakeholders should also be brought in an effective management of disaster management. So all these things these are some of very brief comments. I was also aiming to speak something on Sendai framework, but ma'am has Dilanti ma'am has largely spoken on that issue, so I would not enter into that phase. But I think I've got a lot of points on disaster research and what kind of aspects on disaster research can be deliberated, and I would look forward to put forward these points to the students who are studying at our place also. So thank you, and thank you to all the speakers who have spoken today, and thank you for giving me the opportunity on behalf of SCDR for putting forth our point. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abhijit, for sharing your insights with all of us. So now I would like to invite Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, sir, for sharing your closing remarks, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Kopal. I'm not switching on the video for bandwidth issues.
No problem.
It was a very enlightening discussion for last 2 hours, I'll say. How I will only give one point, that unless we decide as to who is the research for and who's going to benefit from it and who's going to implement it, till such time these three stakeholders come together, that disaster research will go into a waste bin. Like we have so many researches being done, but they are not finding any outcome. So before the disaster research on any topic is to be carried out, this has to be seen, and the end user, both whether they will take out a policy document or execute it or adopt it, they have to be identified so that they are part of the research program, and then the outcome of the research will be actually usable, which Dr. Dilanti was mentioning. Because every research we are talking about what is the impact of the research and who's going to use it. But I have seen with so many researches being carried out in NIDM by the interns in NIDM, that they are doing it, which is sponsored by their own institutions, but they come to NIDM to take the guidance. But many of them are not related to the actual reality. So research topic to be chosen has to be very, very objective, and it has to have as to how it is going to be used. Unless that is clear, then we will keep doing research which will be just paper exercise, and but not finding too many takers for that. So that is my issue, that that multi-stakeholder consultation right to the very end where it is to be applied should be first thought of, discussed, and then a research should be taken. Rest all points given by the various speakers are all valid, and I'm sure the report, once it comes out, will be a very useful one for times to come. And I thank everyone for the valuable suggestions. Thank you so much, and back to you, Dr. Kopal.
Thank you very much, sir. In fact, very rightly said that unless it is clear that who is this research for, who is going to be benefited, and who is going to implement it, this is definitely going to waste. So these are very important points that you have raised, sir, and summed up the session at a glance, sir. So thank you so much for your presence and for your guidance throughout the session and throughout our things, sir. Thank you so much. Now I would like to invite Dr. PG Dhar Chakravarti, sir. Are you here with us for your closing remarks?
I think very interesting workshop. Thanks NIDM and SCDR for joining hand to organize this workshop. So NIDM is legally mandated for promoting education, research and training. So they have done quite a lot in these fields. Now I think based on the ideas that have emerged, NIDM should follow it up with the SCDR, which is also an ICSSR Center for Disaster Research, and similarly other disaster research centers in India and universities to organize another bigger workshop to chalk out what should be our agenda for research for the coming 5 years, a long-term kind of an action plan for guidance. So so that would be the concrete outcome of this. Whatever ideas have come up, we can consolidate those and then further take it forward. So then this research will not be, this workshop will not be for the sake of it, but it will also be usable workshop. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Very rightly said. Some really brainstorming insights have been, have come up with the help of this workshop, and they should be formulated as soon as possible. So thank you very much, sir. So Professor Anil Kumar Gupta, sir, can we have you for your closing remarks?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gopal. I would not say much, only that there are very important points that have emerged. So, Dr. Gopal, let us also take a very sincere follow-up on this, and will come out with a brief write-up, as ED and IDM also suggested. And we'll look forward that how it is followed up by some actions also. And as Niti Aayog and Department of Science and Technology are our partners, and they have been collaborating with us. SCDR also. Professor Joshi could not join because of some reasons, but Dr. Abhijit is here, and Professor Joshi is our very good friend. Dr. Abhijit is also closely working with us. So let us see that how these points that have emerged today contribute to the overall systematic approach to support capacity building and the advancement of knowledge in disaster research. So thank you, and I am very thankful to Professor Delanthi Amratunga. Professor Delanthi is known to me for more than 15 years or so, and I am closely associated as part of her research journal also, and so many other publications he is very frequently publishing and guiding a lot of students also. And we have a lot of opportunities to interact and discuss on very important aspect. Her interest in South Asia region is another dimension that makes us working very closely on many aspects. Thanks to other speakers, Dr. Neeraj Sinha, Senior Advisor Niti Aayog, Dr. Akhilesh Gupta ji, Senior Advisor Department of Science and Technology, Preeti Bansal from the Office of Principal Scientific Advisor to Government of India, and all others who spoken at this occasion and provided their very important insight, which are very much useful. Thanks to Dr. PG Dhar Chakravarti, his support and guidance is always with us, and he has been my supervisor, and now after his leaving to an IDM, then while he was at NDMA and while he was a Secretary of Interstate Council, then also we have been interacting. And after his superannuation also, we find opportunity to work together at various occasions, and we always learn a lot from his experience and insights. So thank you, the World Conference of Disaster Management Committee, Dr. Ananda Babu and all, for providing us an opportunity. Thanks to SCDR JNU for collaborating with us, and not last but and least, but very significant, our Executive Director in IDM, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, always very supportive, very open, and very motivating to all of us for these kind of endeavors, this kind of cooperation. His support is always very important for all of us. Thanks to Kopal, to you, and the entire team, all Harshit and other people, they are here in IDM. Abibi, they are sitting. So all the team of ECDRM and the IT team of WC, World Conference on Disaster Management also. Thank you very much, and looking forward to the outcome of this program very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Now I would like to invite Dr. Abhijit Dwivedi for, would you like to propose a vote of thanks, formal vote of thanks?
Yeah. Thank you. I would like to thank, first of all the dignitaries who have joined today for the deliberation. And formally, I would like to thank, first of all, Dr. Professor Anil Gupta, sir, for when he started the session and put forth the context in which this disaster research and how the field has evolved and is evolving forward, and what can be the points of discussions for the present seminar, for the present workshop which is going to take place. I am thankful to Professor Major General Manoj Vindal, who is the Executive Director of NITM, for putting forth how disaster research needs to be seen forward. What are the kind of nitty-gritties which researchers should take into account while doing research, and what kind of ethical consideration should be there. And in the end also, sir has very rightly highlighted that how to be careful of the fact that research remains useful and usable when any research takes place with respect to disaster. I'm thank to you, sir. I'm thank to Dr. Akhilesh Gupta from DST, who has rightly analyzed why DR needs to grow from a vertical strata to a kind of horizontal field of knowledge, and how what is expected from a kind of research professional working in the field, and what kind of how the research has also, he has also highlighted how the disaster research has moved over the period of time. And he also very peculiarly and particularly highlighted the point of a lack of research facilities, appropriate research facilities and institutions with respect to research and policy on disaster management. So we thank you, sir, for today's remarks which you have made out of your busy schedule. We are thankful to Professor PG Chakravarti, sir, who has given a very landoscopic view of the disaster research, how the field is presently, how the disaster research and disaster management engages with each other, and how the field of disaster research is evolving, what all is happening in the field of disaster research, what are the gaps wherein disaster research and the professionals working in the field of disaster research need to take care of, and what can be the future direction and opportunities which you have in the field of disaster research. So we are very thankful to you, sir, for your very intelligent interjections today, sir. We are thankful to Dr. Neeraj Sinha ji, who identified what has been done in the field of disaster research, and also what kind of gaps exist in the field of disaster research, and what should be done in the field of disaster research as we move forward. He emphasized on how disaster research needs to be connected in a more holistic sense. So we are thankful to you. He also highlighted on several scientific aspects related to disaster and how disaster research is associated with science and technology. Preeti Basil, ma'am, we are thankful to you. Ma'am has highlighted what can be the possible scope of work for NIDM, and how it can use the present enabling environment which is existing in different fields of policy making, and what different kind of policies are emerging, and how that can be used by NIDM to formulate a better structure of disaster research. So we are thankful for you, ma'am, to identify and also hint in this direction. And we are thankful to Professor Dilanti Amartunga, ma'am, who has who has cooperated with us in the organization of this seminar, and has agreed to kind of shifts which are taking place. And she has highlighted how Sendai framework works with how Sendai framework reflects on the disaster research, and how science and technology can be used as an efficient mechanism with respect to disaster research. And she highlighted 11 points, and then she gave 5 more pillars of opportunities with respect to disaster research. So we are thankful to all of you. We are thankful to Dr. Gopal Verma ji for very efficiently handling the session and organizing the session and taking forward session ahead. Ultimately, I would like to thank the organizing team who have taken who have very effectively and very aesthetically in a very appropriate sense organized this present program. So we are thankful to all of you also. Last but not the least, if I have missed someone to thank or identify their, appreciate their, acknowledge their role in organization of this seminar. So I am thankful to all of them. I am thankful to Professor P.K. Joshi sir also, who somehow could not join the program because of some urgency and gave the opportunity to me to represent SCDR. We hope on behalf of SCDR, I thank you all, and we hope that we keep engaging with you ahead also. So thank you to all of you once again. That's all from my side, Kopal.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Abhijit also. Thank you to Dr.
Thank
Abhijit,
you.
and thanks to everyone.
Yes.
And thanks
Yes, thank
each of you for making this seminar a success. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, sir. I would like to take Mr. Sandeep's name because he has been working very hard with this, with the entire organizing, and I have bothered him a lot with my questions. So Mr. Sandeep and Mr. Saksham and the entire IT team working towards WCPM, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
So now here we can formally close the session now. Thank you so much everyone for joining.